Hey gang, Dre Harrison back at it once again for a brand new video for you, and welcome to Ask Dre, the show where on social media I ask you for your questions regarding the world of motorsport and one non-motorsport related question because they're always fun, and I will do my best over the next half an hour or so to answer them. Now, again, if you want to get in on an Ask Dre, leave a comment down below on an Ask Dre video and I'll try and get to it. I do normally ask Twitter and Instagram first, so that's Twitter at Harrison101HD and the show's podcast at Twitter at Motorsport_101, or our Instagram page at Motorsport101pod, P-O-D, where I send an inbox in there and I will do my best to answer your questions. Like I said, it hasn't got every question on there because I didn't want to keep the video relatively medium length, rather than a full-length podcast. But if you want every question I got during the inbox, check the website out, motorsport101.com/blog for the full-length edition, where I go into a little bit more detail as well. It's a bit more refined if you prefer your content written rather than video and whatnot. So without further ado, let's get into the questions, and apologies in advance if I butcher anybody's names. I am not the best at this, just looking at my second monitor here. Quote, which IndyCar rookie do you see having the best season in 2022? And that's from Sammy Mexim. It's a great question. It's a heaped field. We have 5 rookies in IndyCar 2022. We've got Carl Kirkwood, David Malukas, Devlin DeFrancesco, Callum Ilott, and Christian Lundgaard. And I have varying opinions on how talented they may or may not be, but the team fit, given IndyCar is a spec series and a lot of it is about resources, I also want to look at the team fit situation as well. A walking example of that is Carl Kirkwood. I'm not going to talk too much about KK, or King Kirkwood as people like to nickname him, because we already did an entire 1-hour video special on Carl Kirkwood and why he's such an important figure in the road to Indy, because at the time he didn't have a full-time seat confirmed. He now does. Unfortunately, it's with Foyt, whose team is, structurally speaking, a mess. So that's not ideal at all. If there's one talent who is good enough that might encourage Foyt to finally get their shit together, it might be King Kirkwood. He has won everything you can win in the junior motorsport ladder in the US, and if there's one guy who should be able to crack it, it's him. I hope he does. Devlin DeFrancesco is probably going to stick out like a sore thumb at Andretti. I think they, as a factory unit, are stretched running 4 cars. I think we've seen cracks of that team chemistry and just inconsistency when they had stronger team outfits than they have right now. But Devlin DeFrancesco wasn't particularly great in Indy Lights last year, didn't win a race in Indy Lights last year, and he's going to a team that might be struggling for resources. I think David Malukas could certainly be one to watch. I think Malukas is a dark horse threat for Rookie of the Year, mostly because I like the fit with Dale Coyne. In the last half-decade, they've been able to get Ed Jones an excellent rookie season when he was first coming up from lights himself. They did an excellent job last year with Romain Grosjean as a rookie in the series, and of course 2 years ago they had the guy that would go on to win the championship in his second full-time year, and that was Alex Palou. So DCR has a proven track record of getting the best out of younger drivers and new drivers into the series, and Malukas could certainly be one to watch. He definitely ran Kirkwood close in lights last year, close enough where I think the better team fit might prove to be the difference maker. The Europeans are interesting. Christian Lundgaard was really good when he filled in at Indianapolis last year out of nowhere from his Formula 2 days at ART. Definitely like a higher tier Formula 2 prospect. And a great team fit. RLL is probably the best team in IndyCar outside of the big 3, but they are running 3 full-time cars for the first time, I think, since 2006. I think it's been well over a decade since they ran 3 full-time cars. So that could be interesting. Like, RLL could be stretched running 3 cars for a full season. We'll have to wait and see. I like Callum Ilott. He's an F1 level prospect driver, but Jinkos is probably a bit too small to make the difference. I think it's hard not to say Lundgaard, given the team fit and the talent level behind him, but I would certainly keep an eye on David Malukas as well as one to watch. Certainly. Kevin Walsh asks, who will be in the factory MotoGP lineup for Ducati in 2023? Great question, and it's a great question because Ducati are kind of in an interesting place at the moment in MotoGP. Francisco Bagnaia was the breakout star of 2021. He really kicked on in the second half of the season, had 5 straight poles to close out the season, won 4 out of the final 6 rounds. This is a guy who was winless in the top flight going into 2021, and yet he won 4 of the last 6 and was unlucky not to take the title fight to a decider because he should have had 5 before he crashed at Misano trying to get away from Marc Marquez. Even so, Bagnaia is probably the favourite going into 2022. He's safe. That's not an issue, right? Jack Miller is the interesting one because Miller came into that team as the number 1. He was promoted up into that position, but he was not the number 1 by the time the season finished. Had a couple of wins, had a few podiums, again 5 on the year, but it was pretty clear by the time we got to the end of the season that Bagnaia was the guy. And this is going to be interesting because there's a big silly season on the horizon for MotoGP. And Ducati always like throwing big money at the big name players. They swung and missed on Maverick Vinales and Alex Rins in the past. Fabio Quartararo and Joan Mir have already openly teased the fact that they're probably going to test the open market and at least listen to offers from other factories. So this could be a ripe, silly season for the picking for Ducati. They've always had the money to throw at high-end talent. They've always tried to go after high-end talent. So all signs point, to me at least, that they're going to try and throw a big old check at Fabio Quartararo and see if they can tempt him over. Ducati can't help themselves. They want to have the 2 best riders in the world on their machinery that they think is the best bike in the field, which it probably is right now. It's the best all-rounder. So I think, personally, they will try all out to get Fabio, and I think they'll get him. Fabio's already said to Yamaha, allegedly off the record, if you guys don't improve next year, I'm gone. And he was the only really good thing about Yamaha in 2021. Everybody else struggled with either the bike, a firing, or physical injury in Frankie Morbidelli's case. So I think they end up replacing Jack Miller. Business is business. You know, we love you, Jack, but you're probably better off back at Pramac or something along those lines, and they give Fabio Quartararo a blank check and say, you fill in the zeros. That's what I think will happen. They're gonna go for the dream team, because that's what they've always done at Ducati. They can't help themselves. Another MotoGP question from Asahi, who asks, who do you think is going to dominate MotoGP? And honestly, I'm in 2 minds on this question. I think there's an 80 to 90% chance. Actually, no, I'm going to say that, actually. I would say if Marquez comes back at 80 to 90% of his best, Marquez probably runs the field over. Because I think we all saw flashes of it last year that Marquez, even while nursing, an injury which we don't know how much it was affected in race by race, he still won 3 rounds last year. 2 of them were at banker rounds, and then he won at Misano as well. He bullied Bagnaia into making a mistake. If Marquez is anywhere near his best, then he should still win the championship, because what's going to happen is he'll win at all his banker tracks, which he's got about 4 or 5 of them at, like, Kota, Phillip Island, he's very, very strong around. Qatar, he's very strong around. The Saxon Ring, he's very, very strong. And any anti-clockwise track, he's going to be very, very popular around and very fast around. And then what will happen is all of the other close contenders will probably just end up taking points off each other, like we've seen for the last 2 years. It's very close in MotoGP right now. It's the most competitive it has ever been in that second tier. If Marquez isn't at his best, it opens the door for a potential, I think, 4-way title fight between Quartararo on a Yamaha, Bagnaia on a Ducati, Joan Mir on a Suzuki, and possibly Marc Marquez on a Honda. That is mouthwatering. I think the 4 best riders in the world right now are on 4 different manufacturers' machinery, and that is very, very interesting. I think that is the most competitively balanced situation I can remember MotoGP since maybe 2007, when Nicky Hayden was coming into that year as champion, and then we just underestimated how good Casey Stoner was going to be. But the sport's in a good place right now. I mean, Marquez is, for me, still the best pound-for-pound racer in the world, but there is enough of an asterisk next to his current status as a rider that opens the door for other people. And I think that is interesting, especially given the bikes that are all on have got very different characteristics. Ducati, top-line speed, Honda, off-corner acceleration, and just being able to have Marquez ride over the limit. Suzuki can turn on a sixpence. Yamaha has excellent apex cornering speed. They're all different, and that's what makes it interesting. But yeah, next question from Nat Lou on Twitter. Hi Natalie. She asks, Sebastian Vettel's strongest season, 2011 or 2013? Now, I spoke about this when I did my long video blog about Sebastian Vettel last year, which I thought was fun to do. For me, it's 2011. 2011 is a season that no one talks about, but for me, it might be the best individual season ever put together by an F1 driver. 2011... It was a 19-race season. Sebastian Vettel won 11 races out of 17 that season. He had 15 pole positions that year. He only finished off the podium twice all season, and one of them was not his fault. It was a puncture and suspension damage in Abu Dhabi that wasn't his fault. He led the most laps of anyone ever. I think it was 739 laps he led that season. And it's still the record for most points per round since we went to the 25, 18, 15 system in 2010. I think he averaged 20.6 points per race, which is an incredible amount of points. I mean, given that you're rewarded more for winning, to have an average points per round above what you would get for second, given we didn't have fastest lap points, and we didn't have a point for sprint races either in 2011, that's an unbelievable season. It's ridiculous. It's just Vettel would show up to a race weekend, probably stick it on pole, and if he stuck it on pole, there was about an 80% chance he'd go on to win. It's about as automatic a winner as you've ever seen in Formula 1. It was ridiculous. 2013 is also a great season. 9 pole positions, 13 wins, and then, of course, the 9-race win streak is nuts. I mean, in a sport where 1,000 variables can affect your Grand Prix and shit can go wrong, it can, has, and will go wrong. To win 9 races in a row in any circumstance is bonkers. I don't think anyone has ever done that in the same season. I think there's been a couple of 9-way streaks that's gone from one season into the next, which I don't think is quite the same because cars can be different and grids can be different, etc. But to win 9 in a row in the same season is nuts. Now, I do mark it down just a little bit because I think half of his rivals had stopped trying by the end of the summer break because they were thinking about 2014 and the V6 hybrids that were coming. But to still win that many rounds in a row is nuts. But I think 2011 is just one of the great all-round seasons of all time. I'd have to do some digging to find a more dominant season individually than that. It was, and like Webber was in the same car as him, and I don't think Red Bull carried a competitive advantage like what we saw with the Mercedes era. And Webber was right there, and Webber was jostling with the rivals behind him. Vettel was in another league in 2011. It was beatings. It was ridiculous. Less mitigating circumstances, I would say 2011. But thanks for the question, Natalie. I had 3 people all ask roughly similar questions regarding shocks, shock moves, bold predictions for the year, etc. There were Devin Altieri, James Calantis, and Sam Sutcliffe, who all asked similar sort of questions. I thought I'd group them into one on this occasion. I have 3 or 4 potential bold predictions for the year, which I'm sure I will not make a video on in early 2023, inevitably, like most Formula 1 YouTubers do. But the ones I had noted down was David Malukas to win Rookie of the Year in IndyCar. I think that's certainly a possibility. Given the Dale Coyne fit I mentioned earlier, it would not surprise me at all if Malukas ended up winning Rookie of the Year. I think that's a bit of a bold one, because I don't think anybody's talking about Malukas, and everybody's talking about Kirkwood and Lundgaard and Eilert being the F1 guys, and as well as Kirkwood, who is the star prospect to come out of lights. So I would say I think Malukas as Rookie of the Year could be one to watch. I think Ferrari can genuinely mount a title threat. I really do. I think Ferrari has very quietly gone under the radar. I think they very quietly went about their business last year, crept up from 6th to 3rd in the Constructors, was the best in the midfielders. They have the resources, they have the driving talent. I think they've got the best team in Formula 1 for pure driving talent with Leclerc and Sainz. It's a formidable driver pairing. Both can win races, both are talented enough to stuff the stat sheet week in, week out. If they get a competitive car, I would say they are very much going to be a threat, because both Mercs and Red Bull still have question marks on their second seats. George Russell is a big unknown going into the year. We don't know how good he's going to be compared to Hamilton, because he's never raced against Hamilton in this sort of machinery. And Sergio Perez, who I think was okay to good as a rookie in that top tier seat, I mean the first real top tier seat he's had in his career, he still got comprehensively slaughtered by Verstappen, and they probably need a bit more from Sergio in year 2 if Red Bull really want to challenge for the Constructors. If they can get a car that's close, I think Ferrari could certainly be one to watch. It wouldn't surprise if they won 3 or 4 rounds next year. A couple of shock moves. I think Johan Mir ends up at Repsol Honda in MotoGP. I think Alberto Puig is ruthless as a team boss. I think he has to be thinking of a failsafe for his second bike, just in case Marquez isn't 100%. I think that Paul Espargaro is a good rider, but I don't think he's a great rider. He did show some improvement towards the end of this season, but I do worry that Espargaro is no better than what Pedrosa was when he was riding the Repsol Honda about 3 or 4 years ago. They've not really kicked on from that second seat since his departure, and it shows. And if that means throwing a boatload of money to get Johan Mir, the man who won the world title in 2020, to have a formidable all-Spanish dream team lineup of Mir and Marquez, that could certainly be one to watch going forward. And I think they need to get out a jail-free card. Like, if Marquez isn't going to be the guy he is anymore, you need a really good backup. And Mir is a way above average plan B. Like, no other factory has a plan B on that level, in my opinion. So, if they could snatch Mir from Suzuki, I think that's certainly one to keep an eye on. Also, one more thing, it wouldn't surprise me if Mercs are not competitive going into 2022, that Hamilton just retires a year early. And if Hamilton retires a year early, I think they give Pierre Gasly a ring. I think Gasly's probably the best driver that's probably going to be on the board of free agency going into 2023. And I think there'll be a big old dogfight to get Gasly out from that Red Bull umbrella. Because it's obvious Red Bull are not going to go back to Gasly, because that would be admitting they were wrong to get rid of him in the first place. And Gasly's been very vocal about that in the last couple of years. So those are a few key shocks for me, if you want some bold predictions. Also, one more that I didn't put on my bullet point list, but I should have mentioned it. Daniel Ricciardo to beat Lando Norris in year 2 at Mercedes. Ricciardo is a much better second-year guy when it comes to new seats. He wasn't so good year 1. He was beaten pretty handily by Lando Norris, but I think once he gets used to this car, I think Ricciardo's true talent will shine through. Compare it to his second year at Renault in 2020. Ricciardo was really goddamn good at Renault before he went to McLaren. I think people slept on that 2020 season that he had, most definitely. Right, a couple more questions. I've got one from Viandra on Instagram who asked, do you think Ayagura could get to MotoGP for 2023 if he becomes a contender this year? I'd say possibly. It's going to be interesting, and the reason why is because MotoGP has had a third of its talent turn over in the last 2 years. Like, last year we had 5 guys get promoted, and those were Remy Gardner, Raul Fernandez, Fabio Di Gianantonio, Marco Bezzecchi, and Moto3's Darren Binder, which was a bit of a surprise one. But point is, 5 guys got bumped up. The year before, you had 3 more, and so you've had 8 riders come up into the top flight in the last 2 years. Obviously, the year before, you had Jorge Martin and Luca Marini come up, and Enea Bastianini will come up. So that's 8 of your 24 seats. And given that most MotoGP teams will give a rider 2 years to play with in terms of getting their feet wet and just generally getting used to the bike and getting used to the series, there might not be a lot of availability this year. I actually feel quite bad for Moto2's 2022 class, because they're probably going to have to be spectacular to give teams enough of an excuse to move somebody on. There is one seat that jumps off the page. It's the obvious one. It's Taka Nakagami's seat at LCR, replacing one Japanese rider for another. I know the series and Honda are both keen to have someone domestic front their bike projects and have a Japanese homegrown star. And Agura was pretty good in Moto2 last year. He was very quietly in the top 8 a lot of occasions last year. He needs to take a step forward in 2022. I think he will. I don't think the field is as strong in 2022 going forward. I think the guys that are probably going to be the main threats are Augusto Fernandez, maybe Aaron Canet, maybe Agura gets in that mix. We'll have to wait and see. I would still say that Lowe's and Navarro at Pons could be guys to watch as well. Lowe's isn't at Pons, but you get what I mean. It's Lowe's in general. He's always a good Moto2 level rider. So there's going to be some hurdles for Agura to get through, and there's probably only one really penciled-in seat with his name on it unless he wins the title. Everyone's going to be watching Pedro Acosta to see how he gets on at KTM in 2022, because if he has a good season, then look out. He's going to be... He was offered MotoGP seats this year, and he turned them down. He wanted to go up the natural way. He was very wise for a 17-year-old, but I would say Agura's got a small chance, but I wouldn't be banking on it, is what I would say. He needs to probably be top 3 in the championship to really think about a proper MotoGP promotion in 2023. My non-motorsport question for the video came from Marcus, and he asked, who survives the Ashes debacle from the England test side besides Stokes and Root? I think most of them will. I don't think there's anyone in the county cricket game that's suddenly going to jump into the test team after this series finished. Like, who's out there that's averaging a shit ton in the county game that's like, oh my god, like, why wasn't this guy on the plane for England? Like, Dominic Sibley was probably the biggest casualty of guys who didn't make it onto the Ashes. The problem is England can't bat. Like, we've not gone above 300 in the Ashes so far this series. We can't bat. Like, we've had flashes of excellence from Root and Milan a couple of times, and Stokes, and of course Bairstow getting our first century of the series this time round, but we still haven't gone beyond 300 in an innings yet. Silverwood might lose his job. He's probably going to lose this series at least 3-0, probably 4-0. But I think you need to fundamentally change the structure of domestic cricket in this country, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, we're just going to keep going and just keep rotating the same 12 batters that we have in our test setup. Whether it be Dom Sibley comes back in, whether Crawley becomes the full-time starter or opener alongside Rory Burns again. Do you put down Lawrence, Ollie Pope or Johnny Bairstow in as a 6? Is Butler going to keep again? None of this matters. It doesn't matter what combination you pick. They can't bat. Like, that's the problem. So I think you've got to put down a 5 to 8 year plan of what you really want to do going forward. And I put some bullet points on my page as to where to start. Put millions into an actual diversity plan so you don't risk losing the best potential athletes and the best potential talents to private schools and other sports. Focus on state schools. Focus on the ones that don't get big private backing or charge a fee to go to, because those guys are all playing football or playing rugby or playing far more accessible sports in the country. You're 17 times more likely to go pro as a cricketer in London if you went to a private school over a public one. It's wild. I would say more money in overseas tours, more Lions tours. Get guys on the fringes of selection and then go out and play other countries like A-sides. Like, go to Sri Lanka, play in Gaul, get used to how the pitches turn and how they degenerate over time. Like, pick them. Have them go out there and learn these pitches. Because if you want to win foreign series, you've got to dig in and know what you're up against. Like, because the county cricket game is not fit for Test cricket purposes at the moment. Go out and play the Sheffield Shield. Go to New Zealand and play on those flat tracks and learn how to bowl on these flat wickets. Like, rather than just have them play on these green fields at Headingley and basically just bowl 79 miles an hour all day with a ball that no one else uses besides the West Indies. That would be a good idea. Separate the coaching into red and white ball. T20 cricket is far too different now compared to the Test game. Like, they are fundamentally different sports at this point. Like, they are nowhere near the same format anymore. Not even close. So separate the coaching and only have the truly exceptional play in both camps. Tell Johnny Bairstow you're only playing T20s, you're not playing tests again. Like, honestly, we need to have a test core, and you're not going to be part of it. Go out and play all the T20 cricket and make all the money you can, because you're going to be a specialist T20 opener for us going forward. Same with Joss Butler. Maybe even the same with Jofra Archer if he can't handle a full test workload. Like, I'd say only guys like Root, who plays in the ODI team, is going to play in both. That should be very limited. Like, look after your talent a little bit more as well. And I would also say double the amount of money on a test contract for England at Central. Double the money. Like, why would Moeen Ali play test cricket in Australia where he can make twice as much money right now by playing in the IPL for Chennai and just doing all that for 3 months' work? He's 34 years old. He's not got long left in his cricket career, so he... My watch went off there. Make Test cricket worth playing, because if you're young, if you're like a Tom Banton or a Sam Curran, make tests worth playing. Otherwise, these guys are just going to go out and do all the T20 cricket they can, because for them it's easy money and for less work than being in the test setup. That's how I look at it. That's a few places where I would certainly start. The rest I'll leave to people that know far more about cricket than I do. But those are all the questions. As I said, get them in the comment section down below if you want to be in February's Ask Dre video. And again, you can tag me on social media. I personally am at Harrison101HD. You can also check us out on our Instagram page, Motorsport101pod. And our podcast Twitter at Motorsport_101 if you want to follow us on there as well. But until then, I've been Dre Harrison, back for more content soon. Sayonara.